Hi there, this is my one-track video for The Hours. Let me start by saying that I won't be jumping up and moving around very much on this video. It'll just be my talking head, mostly because there's a little dog at my feet, and if I move at all, he will jump into my lap. And he's not quite ready to star in one of my one-track videos. So that's not going to happen. Um, And let me also add that I don't know if you can hear it, but I have a soundtrack this time. It's string quartets of Philip Glass. Philip Glass did the composer, was the composer and did the score for The Hours. I think he was nominated for an Oscar for it, but very distinctive minimalist style, and I am a fan, and so I thought I would have a soundtrack. So far in my first video, I demonstrated good camera work by having bad camera work. In the second one, I demonstrated good lighting by having bad lighting. And then the third one, I showed you that very impressive high angle shot of my bookshelf. So these are all formal elements of film, and I've added sound design to this one. Okay, in this video I'm going to be talking about 4 books and 3 films. So I better get to it. First film I want to talk about actually doesn't have that much to do with what we're doing right now. Is over the weekend I went out and I saw Inherent Vice, Paul Thomas Anderson's latest film, in the movie theater, which is it's been quite a few months since I saw a film at the movie theater. I liked it quite a lot. The reason I bring it up here is because Inherent Vice is a film adaptation of a novel by Thomas Pynchon. Wrote Gravity's Rainbow and other books. He is considered to be one of the primary impossible to film authors. And of course, we have quite a few of others of those impossible to film authors on our syllabus. So someday Inherent Vice might actually end up on the syllabus, because I think it is well done. The directing is quite good, cinematography and sound, in terms of capturing the music of the day. The book and the film are both set in 1970. So if you know anything about the film, you might know that it's sort of a stoner film, in that the main character, a private detective, is a stoner and ingests all sorts of drugs throughout the film. Not, of course, that I'm recommending anything like that. In fact, in some ways it's a good advertisement for not doing drugs, seeing a film like that. So, as I said, it recreates a time period well, 1970, sort of the end of the counterculture. Um, in that sense, it reminds me of a whole bunch of other films that are sort of set around the same time and deal with drugs and counterculture. Other films would be Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, starring Johnny Depp and directed by Terry Gilliam. There's Naked Lunch, an older film directed by David Cronenberg. There's The Big Lebowski, one of my favorite films, and I would say that Inherent Vice is a lot like The Big Lebowski in terms of being a sort of a mystery, but also a comedy. And all these films are, the great films in the stoner canon. I guess maybe not stoner, because some of these films deal with other drugs. Um, but another film that Inherent Vice reminds me of is one on our syllabus, and that is Scanner Darkly. So when we get to that, well, you'll see that it's about the counterculture and the dark side of the counterculture and the dark side of drugs and what have you. That film is done in rotoscoping, whereas Inherent Vice is more traditionally non-animated live action. But I certainly recommend it, mostly for an example of yet another impossible to film book that has gotten a pretty decent adaptation out of Paul Thomas Anderson. So let me leave that at that. All right. Now I'm going to talk about the books that are involved with this film, The Hours. So I have them here with me. So, unlike Pride and Prejudice, I didn't have the copy of the book. I do have a copy of The Hours by Michael Cunningham. And you'll notice that I fixed the camera so that you're not seeing these things backwards. So, Michael Cunningham's book, The Hours. I'll just say a quick few things about this. This is a movie tie-in novel edition. So that in itself is quite significant, and it's something we haven't really talked about in this class. But it is, for one thing, I don't know about you, but I often go see films, film adaptations of literary works, and oftentimes I see the film before the literary work, and then I'll read the literary work. In fact, I'm thinking very seriously of reading Inherent Vice by Thomas Pynchon. And oftentimes, if I read the book after I see the film, basically the actors are the faces I see in my imagination when I am reading the book. So, that's all something worth talking about in a film adaptation course in terms of the order of reception, in terms of receiving or reading the book and then seeing the film, or seeing the film and then reading the book, and basically getting a different reception, however you do that. Winner of the Pulitzer Prize, New York Times bestseller, winner of the PEN/Faulkner Award for Fiction. Very lauded book. Another book that I'll say a few things about is Mrs. Dalloway. Again, this is the book by Virginia Woolf, which the film talks, the Virginia Woolf section of the film deals with Virginia Woolf writing this book, Mrs. Dalloway, one of the great works of stream of consciousness fiction in English. However, though I thought this was a great book, this book, Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse, which is the book that she wrote immediately after Mrs. Dalloway, also considered a classic in stream of consciousness. This, actually, I had a very profound experience reading this book. I first read it in college as part of a college class. I think it was British Modernism. And these days, at least I don't typically put whole novels on my syllabus, but this one I did. This one my professor did back in undergrad. So, reason it was so profound was, well, for one thing, I hadn't read it until like 2 days before I was going to be tested on it. So, like many of you, no doubt, there's some things you just don't get to in time. And so I had basically had a weekend to read To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. And the fact that it's a great novel, written by a great writer, but also just that very condensed period of immersion in the novel was, I truly was immersed in the novel. And mostly because, which is true somewhat of The Hours, Michael Cunningham's novel, and also Mrs. Dalloway, is that the stream of consciousness, it basically puts you in the head of a character. You see things through that character. You think things through that character because you're really being privileged to basically sit there and watch their thoughts go by as you're reading. And so as a result of that, and because I only had 2 days to read it, and I spent the whole weekend reading this novel, and because of the way it was written, I was immersed into the story. I was immersed into a character. I was living in that character's skin and bones. And then, spoiler alert, about 2/3 of the way through the novel, the main section ends, which is being narrated, thought by Mrs. Ramsay. About 2/3 of the way through, the next section of the book is called Time Passes, and Mrs. Ramsay has died. It was pretty a grief-stricken moment for me, because I felt so connected to this character and so involved in the story through her point of view, and then suddenly she's gone, and you just got to pick up the pieces and move on. Anyway, great experience reading a book. I recount this story to my students just to talk about the power of reading. So, you know, even if you only got 2 days to read a novel, immerse yourself in it, and you'll have a good experience, I think. All right, my Kindle just went off with my notes. Okay, I'll stop talking about that. We're already 10 minutes in. I'm going to try to whip through the rest. So, I mean, the qualities that a book like To the Lighthouse and Mrs. Dalloway and The Hours, because of its stream of consciousness, it provides immersion for the reader. It provides a sense of interiority. You get a sense of their sort of psychological makeup, and it allows you to identify with the character. So, let's see, I might skip this part. Well, I'll just mention that the one reason why The Hours is on the syllabus and why I think it's an important work is that, well, it's about AIDS. And that at the time when I first read the novel by Monica Cunningham, I was working on a novel about the AIDS epidemic, and that was based on personal experience. I spent 2 years working as a home health aide with men dying of AIDS. So, in a sense, my novel was to commemorate that. But probably one reason why I never really finished it was because works like The Hours came out, and also Angels in America by Tony Kushner, which was similar to what I was working on. But anyway, it was quite an honor and a privilege to help these men die in dignified ways, and you know, needless to say that when seeing that theme in the book and in the film affects me in quite a personal way. All right. Another book I wanted to talk about, just sort of to compare to The Hours, is a book called Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. It had a film adaptation a couple years ago, which I'll talk about in a minute. The novel it's quite, you know, postmodern and somewhat difficult. Another impossible to film book that got a film adaptation. There were 3 directors. Tom Twyker, who did Run Lola Run, and the Wachowski siblings. And in case you haven't been following, one of the Wachowski brothers got a sex change operation and became female, and so now they are the Wachowski siblings. About the book, again, it's very, very complex in terms of its narrative structure. There are 6 different narratives. One narrative starts, and then it gets interrupted by the next narrative, which refers back to the former narrative until 6 narratives are halfway completed, and then the process reverses, and the 6 narratives are completed. And they're all connected. They're connected in a literary way in the book, in terms of one narrative influences and seeds the next. And actually each of the narratives are sort of in a different medium or mode of writing, in terms of one's a letter, one's a journal, you know, one's testimony of a trial and whatnot. Very, very interesting book, well worth reading. Actually, David Mitchell has another book out now that's on bestseller lists. An interesting way to draw that narrative together, and it works in a literary way because you have time to figure it out. Now, the film adaptation. So how do you take that very literary way of connecting 6 narratives and knitting them together? How do you do that in a film? Well, you don't. So the filmmakers had to choose a different strategy, and their strategy was to tie together the 6 narratives by basically having the same actor playing different roles. There's a theme of reincarnation in the book, and the filmmakers follow that. Their strategy of having actors knit the narratives together doesn't really work. The film bombed at the box office. The narrative was pretty much incoherent. So their strategy didn't really work that well. Compared to that, The Hours does also has a different strategy in the film than in the book to tying the narratives together. But in the film, they tie it together with visual punning, basically. So you have your everyone going out to buy flowers and breaking eggs and kissing one another. Um, so. All right. So let me. I've mentioned how that works with the hours in terms of their strategy and how that works. I think is kind of inconclusive here, but I think I'm going to stop here. I don't have much time to go on. But I did. I think I did talk about my 4 books and my 3 films. So anyway, I will stop here, and in a little bit I will do another one for yeah, adaptation.